Happy Teenager Tuesday, parents. Here we are. Back
Here we
on the
are.
podcast.
Back at it.
Tuesday.
Still going to school. Still
Yeah.
driving home.
Still doing it. Hope you're driving safe today. We're in part 4 of our series around identity. And if you've missed any of the parts before, please go back because they kind of build off of each other. Sometimes they're standalones and they can kind of make sense on their own, but these really build on each other. This is really kind of filmed like a 40-minute podcast, but in 4 parts.
Yeah.
So please go back and do that. We're kind of finishing up today, leaning into the idea of like how your competencies do not give you an identity.
Mm-hmm.
You can you can have an accomplishment, and if we're not careful, that we can look at the accomplishment, the talent, the skill, the job, the thing that we're good at as the definition of who we are. Pastor Nate at the Prosper campus, he has a story about a guy he went to high school with who is an amazing basketball player. So good, he played Division I basketball, which is really hard to do, very, very hard to do. And he went and played at the University of Oklahoma, and he was really good there too. He was on track to play in the NBA. He played in the March Madness, went to the Final Four. Really stinking big deal, amazing starting basketball player, and then he had devastating knee injury. And so bad that it like ended his career in basketball. And he ended up coming back home, and Nate saw him, and Nate was like, "How are you? How you doing?" And the guy was just lost. He was like, "I don't know who I am anymore." He said, I'm a basketball player that can't play basketball. So if we're not careful, we will take things that we're competent at and we'll fuel confidence with what we're good at. And that's okay at times, but it's not okay if that's the end all be all to who you are. You know?
Yeah.
And Kira, recently in the last year, we're still a little bit more than a year now.
A little bit.
You kind of had a cool moment like that.
Yeah, so just to give you guys a little bit of a backstory on who I am and a little bit of my life. I grew up in a Christian home. I'm a pastor's kid. I was always highly involved in church and really had a relationship with the Lord on my own from a really young age. My parents are amazing, and they are the ones who would consistently point me back to scripture in hardships and in hard times. And along the journey, I mean, we all go through sin struggles, and along my walk, like many, I also went through those sin struggles. But when I was in high school, I fell into temptation and had premarital sex, and I was so ashamed of that for so many years that I felt like I needed to work my way back up to where I once was in my relationship with Christ. I knew who God was. I knew all the truth about who he says that I am, but it was so hard to believe it because I was to the point where I felt so unworthy of the identity that he had given me. And because of that misplaced identity, I fell into so much of a perfectionism mindset and trying to get back to the quote perfect relationship that I had with God. And just because I had sinned in a big way, I felt like I had to make up for what I had done. So because of those lies and misplaced identity, I began to take pride in the things that I did really well and the gifts that God had given me. This made failing really, really hard because I found I took pride in the things that I did well and in my successes. And instead of growing through my failures, I was paralyzed by them, and they made me feel completely useless, like I had no purpose and couldn't even really do what God had gifted me to do. And I was just completely missing the point of all of those failures. So in camp 2022, God spoke to Will with words that I really needed to hear. And I honestly needed to hear them for years and years, but I feel like I was finally ready to accept them at that moment. And it was, you're not what you do, you're not your failures, you're not your job. And in that moment, I knew that all the titles I will hold, all the things that I'm good at, and all my failures didn't matter in the ways that I thought they did. And my faith went from knowledge-based and works-based, back to where it started, in full faith of the fact that God created me as his child, and all I have to do is accept, trust, and believe that he is who he says he is and has done what he says he's done. And that's still a daily battle for me. But I've grown so much in the last year with finding my identity, and I think that's one of the big reasons why I'm so passionate about hopefully you as parents finding your identities, and then hopefully you helping your teenagers find their identities too, because I wish that I had put the time in earlier.
Yeah. Or just had that, like, Kira's problem has been that Kira is very good at a lot of things. And thankfully, I was not blessed that way of being good at things. No, but we can. It can be so easy to fall into the trap of our salvation. Our salvation is secured, and yet we still feel so unworthy. So we have to prove something.
Yeah. And
if we're trying to prove something to God, and really prove something to ourselves, then our salvation is still secure, but while we're on earth, we are insecure,
right?
Constantly, because we're trying to backfill that. Like you use the word unworthy, we're trying to backfill unworthy, and like we talked about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago in Genesis 3, it's like just trying to do our best to cover up our own failures instead of coming back to that original realization of I'm a child of God, and what does that mean?
Yeah. And working through the fact of like, I am unworthy. Like me as a human, I am unworthy, but that doesn't take away the fact that God covers that unworthiness, and I can be confident in what he's done for me.
Yeah. And confidence, it's not a bad thing, and being good at something is not a bad thing. We should have more and more Christian leaders that are in positions of power. That's a good thing. Christians in powerful positions are good. Christ followers with more money is a good thing, because hopefully we work at being more and more generous. Like, we're not saying to avoid success.
Right.
It's saying don't let success consume you. It's like what you drink, right? If we're drinking the majority of water all the time, right? If pure water, whatever, good water, then our bodies will be healthier. If the majority of what we're consuming is soda, then we're still getting liquid. We're still going to stay alive, but there's going to be consequences.
Right.
And it's like if we're only consuming this like confidence and we're good at this and our accomplishments make us, then there's going to be consequences of that. And that's why we leaned in at the very beginning of like leaning in on your attributes are not your identity.
Yeah.
You know your identity, and then you learn the attributes.
Yeah.
It's just slightly different from that,
Yeah, that's so good. And I think it's so important to push through and have those hard conversations on identity with your students, because you may think that they're completely secure in who they are, but who they are might be completely misguided based on the things that they're involved in and where their identity is placed and where they take pride in. And so I think talking about the difference between humility and pride, and the fact that, whether you think you're a great person or a horrible person, that's still pride. This just the two sides of it. And you can be humble and have a humble confidence, which is truly knowing who you are and walking in that truth no matter what the circumstances are around you.
Yeah, love that. So we have one more to do for this. It's another conversation to have, right?
Yes.
Go for it.
Yeah, so start the conversation with your student about what possible roadblocks there might be to completely giving themselves over to God, and where they may be too confident in themselves to the point where they're taking up the spot of their identity where God should be.
Yeah.
So be vulnerable about this too. And I think, again, talking about setting up spiritual conversations and having those conversations with your students, I think this is going to be another really good one to have with them about where they may have put something in a pedestal above God.
Yeah. And it's good to check in. It's good to check in for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because we drift as people, and it's obviously it's good to check in with our students. So Hey, signing off. Parents, you can do this. You're not alone. God is with you, and so are we. Can't wait to see you back next week when we start a brand new series called Hot Topics. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff over the next 2 months, including drugs, vaping, what do you do with politics? Politics season's coming up, sexuality, and so much more. So we can't wait to see you back.